I'm ready whenever you are.
You ready?
Yep. Just have a note.
All right, good evening. It's Monday, September 12th. This is the Stoughton Plan Commission meeting. We do have a quorum, so we'll go right into our order of business. And the first item would be to consider the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. I would entertain a motion to do so.
Move to approve.
Second.
A second. There's a motion by Schumacher and a second by Bradford. Any discussion on the minutes?
Nope.
Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. And any opposed? That motion carries. Next item would be the City Council Representative report. Alderperson Caravello, did you want to give that this evening?
Sure. There are just two items, as long as you guys can hear me okay.
We can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fabulous. At the August 9th council meeting, 016 of 2022 was passed, and at the August 23rd council meeting, R169 of 2022.
All right, thank you. And the next would be the staff report. Director Shield.
Contained in your packet is just a monthly update on activities. I think one thing that was noteworthy is the number of single-family, 1- and 2-family homes are really taking off right now. And I think we've actually got like 8 or 9 applications in our office this week already. So, in addition to what's on the report, we're up over 40 for this year at this point. Available to answer any other questions you may have.
Any questions from any of the commissioners?
Director Shield, is there any update on the West Main Street situation with that blocked off driveway, or is that still going to come back to us?
That's still planning to come back.
Okay, so they haven't, or they're working on an agreement,
Yep.
I'm assuming.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, we'll go to item number 5, which is a rezoning request for 1008 Riverview Drive from SR4 single family to SR5 single family. And before we go into the public hearing, we can maybe give a quick overview of the project.
Yeah, so on the screen, you'll see there's a single-family lot currently that is sizable enough that if it's rezoned to the SR5 would allow for a split to allow for another buildable site on this particular parcel. The first item on your agenda for this item is related to the rezoning. So once it would be rezoned to SR5, then the CSM could be put into effect to meet the setbacks with the SR5 district standards. SR5 is a single-family residential district with slightly different setback limits than the SR4.
All right, any initial questions from commissioners on this one?
Do we know whether, if they do decide to develop that lot, what orientation the house would be, and whether the driveway would be Roby or Riverview?
There's some applicants here. I think they'll be able to answer that.
Yep, great.
My guess is,
You can come up to the podium here, and if you want to just introduce yourself, go ahead. You might have
Eric
to adjust
Olson.
the mic a little bit.
Eric Olson, I represent the agent for the sellers. The driveway would be consistent with the neighboring driveways and be off of Riverview and not on Roby.
Okay, great.
It's safer and easier. The setbacks would be the same, consistent with the adjoining area.
Okay, and it would be
They're
in the
similar.
same orientation and not perpendicular to...
Correct. It would be the same orientation as next door.
Got it, okay. Thank you.
have you connected with the utilities about sewer and water laterals to the future lot? Is there separate ones that,
We haven't connected with them yet, but we understand that we're going to have to
I didn't know where they
pay to
were.
install them and put a new lateral in with the new fees and park fees.
All right, any other questions for Eric or anybody else before we go into the public hearing? All right, hearing none, we'll close our regular meeting, reopen for the public hearing. I did not have anyone signed up to speak. Anybody here want to speak regarding this issue? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. and then reopen for our business. Anything else we need to add to the conversation?
No, I don't think so. This item is really just related to the rezoning. It would rezone the entire parcel. The subsequent action would consider the split of the lot.
All right. At this point, I would entertain a motion for a recommendation to the city council.
I'll make the recommendation.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion by Schumacher and a second by Bradford. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. And then item number 6 is the CSM request to split the lot. And anything you want to cover on that one, Rodney?
I don't think I need to say more than what this split would do is create a compliant parcel for Lot 1 for the existing home and create the additional parcel, Lot 2. As was stated before, they'll explore where sewer and water laterals would have to come from for that at the time of development.
All right. Any questions on the CSM? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion on this one to recommend to council.
I'll go ahead and move.
I'll recommend we move this to council.
All right, Caravello, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Schumacher. Any discussion on this one? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? None opposed, that motion does carry. So these will be on for the city council 2 weeks from tomorrow. All right, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You bet. Item number 7 is a rezoning request for 2232 Addison Drive from industrial to planned development, general development plan. We also have a need for a public hearing on this one. Anything we need to cover beforehand?
Yeah, I'll just highlight what's at stake here. This is the formerly dedicated to the parkland that has been through the process to have been vacated, and it is now in private ownership, and therefore it's able to be rezoned. It's being rezoned. These lots, the adjacent lots, were rezoned as part of a planned unit development prior to the new zoning code. So now we have to use the PD zoning district, of which we have under ordinances now. You'll note that the zoning that's proposed identifies the specific setbacks, and those setbacks would be consistent with the adjacent lots that were zoned under the previous PUD planning process.
All right, this was also known as the tot lot.
Yeah.
Any questions before we go into the public hearing? Hearing none, we'll close the regular meeting, reopen for the public hearing. And once again, nobody was signed up for this one. Nobody's in the room, and nobody's on Zoom. So I guess we can close the public hearing and then reopen for our business here. Anything else we need to cover?
I think this captures it well. It's consistent with the adjacent parcels. It was the understanding of the council, I think at the time it was being vacated, that was a purpose.
Mhm.
All right, at this point, I would entertain the motion to go to city council.
I will so move.
All right, second on this one?
Second.
Second by Bradford. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed, that motion carries. Item 8 is a vacation portion of Welcome Way at US Highway 51. I think most of you are familiar with this one. Go ahead, Randy.
This is a small segment of Elkman Way between Nygaard Street and US Highway 51 as part of the plating process for the 51 West development. The understanding was that Velcomen Way would be discontinued in this segment. At the time, Greenbrier Drive to the north would be extended to Nygaard Street. As you've driven through there, you'll see that connection's almost finalized and opposite of Rutland Dunn Town Line Road. So it's appropriate to move forward with the vacation. DOT supports the request to vacate it as well.
Any questions or comments on this one?
I have one comment, if nobody else is gonna do it,
Go ahead.
about the rest of Velkeman Way being jealous if we only send a portion of it on vacation.
So
You know, if
noted.
Sid Boersma were here, he would have been on top of that all
Yeah,
over
he
it. So I
would've.
kinda, somebody had to do it, sorry.
Didn't know you had it in you, Phil. That's awesome. So when will
No, are
this,
you on vacation also and just outside your house?
No, I'm in Vernon County right now.
Okay.
I do have a question though.
okay, go ahead, Tom.
I know that you would like to vacate that because of vehicle traffic, but is it in any way prudent to reserve it for pedestrian usage at any time in the future?
We haven't identified that as a pedestrian connection at that location, but certainly we are reserving, or there will be dedicated easements across his parcel for the utilities that are going underground. You'll recall we are trying to have the underpass put in just to the north of Rutland Dunn Town Line Road for that connection, as well as the connection at the Rutland Dunn Town Line Road at grade crossing.
Will we be having, I know like over towards Kettle West, we have a 10-foot wide trail along the road. Is that considered for the future of Highway 51?
Yeah, there's a 10-foot wide, we're calling it a sidewalk, on both sides of 51 that would be installed, parallel to this, that
Right.
certainly would continue north and south here.
So could that be used as a connection for pedestrians and bicyclists to connect to that?
Well, it certainly could. If there's interest in reserving that as a pedestrian easement across there, we could identify that and work with the landowner to do so. One of the initial thoughts about doing that is concern about the appearance of a crossing of 51. If we create that environment, I don't know if it's real or speculative, but that was a concern raised in a previous discussion in this corridor about creating a T location where people would come up to 51 with potentially some interest in crossing at that point then.
I understand, but it's also a good spot. I mean, otherwise, where do you connect to this future sidewalk? I mean,
Yep.
Yeah,
Valid point.
I'm just asking the question. I mean, it may be, I don't want to lose something that potentially in the future could be helpful, just like we lost everything along the river where there was a street right of way years ago, which could have been a trail connection.
Yeah, if that's a consideration that wants to be explored deeper, we can certainly make that part of the action, identifying the methods to preserve, I'll say, a 15-foot wide corridor for a sidewalk or pedestrian connection of some sort.
I think it'd be a prudent thing to consider.
Okay. So do you want to make the motion to include that?
I do.
Okay.
Can I make a comment, please?
Sure, I can't see it. Is that Bob?
Yeah.
Okay,
Hi, Tim.
go ahead.
Please keep in mind, we do have a connection at Greenbrier there. We got a 10-foot wide path just north of Lot 18 that connects with Highway 51 and the rest of the paths throughout 51 on the east side that are eventually going to connect with underpass and to the west side. So that's kind of integrated already in the north side of Lot 18, parallel with Greenbrier.
Maybe I can just add, for consideration. What I think I heard Alder Majewski suggesting is that we preserve an easement across that property to accommodate a future improvement if that seems to become necessary. So I don't think I heard interest in connecting that with the sidewalk at this time, but allowing for that potential connection in the future. Did I characterize that all right, Alder
You
Majewski?
did.
That's what I heard.
Okay. All right. So we had a motion by Alder Majewski. Was there a second?
I will second that.
Second by Caravello.
And I appreciate Alder Majewski's bringing that up. I actually hadn't thought about that that could potentially be just a convenient little piece of connector there.
Yeah, if you weren't on vacation, you probably would have thought of it.
True.
Where does this 0.35 acre, does that go then to the adjoining lot? Is it split between two? How does it?
So it's split evenly between the two adjacent property owners. The property on Lot 18 to the north, and then the parcel to the south.
Yep.
Bob Dvorak is the owner to the south, and Lakestone Properties, I believe, is a property owner to the north. They've already signed an easement document securing the underground utilities, or the utilities through this area. After the vacation would occur, that would get recorded to preserve the underground utilities there.
Okay, thank you.
And then also as a guest tonight on another item, we have Attorney Manthe, and it looks like he might have a comment on this one.
Oh, I was just going to agree with Rodney. So he beat me to the punch.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right. So hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposed?
Who moved and said?
Majewski and Caravello. None opposed, that motion carries. Thank you. Item number 9 is extraterritorial land division at 3511 State Highway 138, Town of Rutland. This one here, we'll be looking for a recommendation, but we can go through it first. It looks like it's sideways or something.
Yeah, I actually have this, this north is on your right-hand side of the screen here, but I have this blown up so you can see it more easily. You'll see this dashed black line that kind of cuts across this part of the parcel and then extends to the left side of the screen. That was the former property line. So as a result of this CSM, they're creating a clean line, the bold black line, and I'll show that better in this next screenshot here. I'm trying to. So now the orientation's correct. State Highway 138 is along the top side of the page, but you'll see on the right-hand side of that parcel, you'll see the dashed line that was the former parcel line, and along the south there, you'll see that was the former parcel line. They're attempting to clean up that line and adjust the property lines accordingly between the two property owners. We don't see any reason to object to that.
So Jerry bought a tobacco shed, is that what it looks like?
I don't know how it all happened. It might have already been being used now. I don't know. But the lot line didn't accommodate it, so.
Yeah, that's out at the Pumpkin Farm there on
Yep.
138,
Yep.
if those on Zoom are familiar with it. All right. Any questions or comments? I guess I'd entertain a motion to recommend this one to council.
I so move.
Second.
Perfect.
Motion by Bradford, second Majewski.
Correct.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 And any opposed? That motion carries. All right. Item number 10, discuss a zoning code amendment for communication towers. This sounds easier said than done. So as I mentioned, we have Attorney Manthe is here, and who's going to begin the discussion?
I think I'll turn it over to Rick at the outset.
All right. So we did have that memo sort of outlining where things stand. I believe that was provided to everybody. But essentially where what precipitated this is there have been some interest in mobile towers in the city. either formal applications or not formal applications at this point, but it sort of raised some questions about what's the city's actually regulatory authority regarding mobile towers. So there have been some recent state law changes, and the city's ordinances may not have kept up with those law changes. So, you know, the memo that was provided sort of outlines what state law now preempts for local regulations as far as these large cell towers. So basically, any sort of zoning requirement or any licensing requirement that the city has that, you know, tries to prohibit cell towers in a certain location or impose aesthetic requirements or a whole host of other regulatory matters, you're preempted by state law from doing that. So, like I mentioned, the city's code hasn't necessarily kept up with those state law changes. In fact, mobile towers are essentially prohibited uses in almost every zoning district. They're just conditionally allowed in some districts. And like I said, state law prohibits you from prohibiting these as uses. So we got to have a conversation with planning staff about, well, are there some things that the city may want to regulate? What can the city regulate? So one of the, I guess, exceptions to the preemption is that the city can impose setback requirements, but only in zoning districts that allow for single-family residential. Or if the cell tower is going to be located on a parcel, then you can impose a setback of the height of the tower if the adjacent parcel allows for single-family residential. So had a discussion with the planning staff and sort of evaluating, well, what would a setback requirement like that look like in the city? Because single-family residential is a permitted use in quite a few districts, and those tend to be smaller lots anyway. So I don't know if we've done like a formal analysis of it, but the thinking is if the city is interested in trying to regulate these and sort of push the towers into districts where they may be more suitable, the thinking would be imposing a setback in any district that allows for single-family residential. To the setback limit would be the height of the tower. So it's not a formal like 200-foot usually like you would see with a lot of structures, but it would be tied directly to the height of the tower. So we feel that that is sort of the best avenue for at least trying to push towers in a more, in a better location, essentially, away from single-family houses and maybe out of, away from other districts where they may not be suitable. There are a few other options, potentially. So in the memo, we mentioned there's the conditional use process, which is how you do that. You currently regulate cell towers with a conditional use permit. But the issue is with another state law change relating to conditional uses, referred to as 2017 Act 67. It really limits what you're able to do as far as rejecting a conditional use permit. So essentially, if the applicant provides substantial evidence that they're going to comply with any ordinance requirements or conditions, you have to approve it. And also state law says that conditional use ordinance requirements have to the extent practicable, be measurable. And that does create some challenges with your conditional use ordinance right now, which is sort of a different challenge. So regulating this through a conditional use permit, we would really need to create a specific conditional use process just for mobile towers. And then the issue that you run into is, well, how do we impose requirements that are both consistent with the state law preemption and the state law conditional use permit requirements? Because usually you would do something like, it has to be in the further interest of public health, safety, welfare. Like that would be a standard one, but that doesn't really have measurable qualities. So it's questionable whether that's allowed or not under state law at this point. So one of the items that we came up for is like a potential conditional use permit requirement would be the tower can't lower the value of adjacent property values. We feel like that's a defensible ordinance requirement. The issue then becomes, well, how do you administer that? Because the applicant would submit their evidence, and presumably once they submit evidence, the presumption is you have to approve that permit. So then, does the city want staff to do their own sort of analysis? Or are you just going to leave it up to the public to provide that? Those are considerations that just sort of complicate the analysis. So the conditional use process is certainly something the city could pursue, but from a practicality standpoint, the setback process that I sort of outlined before, that's going to be more clear-cut, easier to administer, and doesn't create these sort of practical concerns moving forward. But I guess today we're just going to see if there's any discussion about this topic, if anybody has any thoughts. You know, what you think of these proposals. That, you know, we don't think of everything, obviously, so if anybody has any other thoughts, we'd be happy to explore. But we figured tonight would just be a good starting point for a discussion, and obviously there is an ordinance that we proposed, or not proposed, that we provided you that sort of would go through that, basically making mobile towers a permitted use in every district, but then establishing that setback for districts that have single-family residential. So that ordinance is in your packet. It's not up for consideration tonight, but again, it's just a discussion point to see what the Plan Commission is thinking and if they want us to pursue potential other options. So I'd be happy to take any questions, or if anybody has any comments.
Anybody have any initial thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I think so. But another way to be able to do this would be to look at what the current coverage would be of other cell phone towers and networks in there, or are they able to parse that out by, like, you know, this bandwidth is covered here and this frequency is covered here, so they could squeak ones in?
Yeah, it gets a little complicated because there are there's federal law and then there's state law. Federal law is infinitely more complex than the state law, but so federal law, basically, you can't have any regulation that would prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting. So essentially, if they've got a hole in their coverage, and there is actually a provision in state law that says you can ask them to see, like in their search ring, if they explored other sites, and if they submit an affidavit that says they explored other sites and they determined this one was the best one, that sort of ends it. So yeah, you can sort of tangentially ask for those things, but it's not necessarily a dispositive consideration.
All right, I just wondered if we'd have, like, maybe we could get a couple of layers of defense on that, so they're not gonna, like, you know, plunk one in the middle of Main Street or something like that on a empty lot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess.
It certainly becomes difficult to plop them down, for instance, on any residential lot, for example. Most of our older lots are 66 by 132. If they're putting up, you know, a 100-foot tower, it's not going to be permitted,
Right.
you know, because of the setback requirements. So you're really going to have to be looking for larger parcels, even if they are adjacent to one that allows single family. You're still going to have, for example, potentially that 100-foot setback from the property line. So, for example, the high school is adjacent to single-family homes. And they actually have one that predates it. But if they were to put up another one, they would have to meet the setback requirement based on the height of the facility. So at a staff level, I think Rick characterized it well. The conditional use process seems clumsy and challenging to defend, and very challenging, maybe even to correctly put the standards in place without forgetting something anyhow. So that's why we took what we think is a more straightforward approach, and I think it still does protect us from the concern and raise other concerns that we might not be thinking about, but we're trying to preserve the protection around single-family properties. But if there's other concerns that we need to be thinking about, let us know about those as well.
Would they be able to access, like if there was a vacant commercial property, would they be able to access that? I mean, those are different ordinances and that we've got regarding those.
Well, they'd
Kind
still
of
be able to put one up
larger.
in a commercially or industrial zone property. If it wasn't adjacent to a single-family zone property, they wouldn't have that height setback restriction.
Okay.
Now, as Rick alluded to, there's federal and state requirements and kind of a review and potentially even co-location language for them to contemplate as well. Another thing that we're aware of is historic districts require certain additional advisory review by the State Historical Society. Might not prohibit it, but there's another review process that has to be gone through for those as well. So the crux of it is, it seems like we can't prohibit them. We have to accommodate them in some fashion, and we're just trying to preempt what we thought were problematic areas with single-family home districts.
Anyone on Zoom have any questions or comments?
I got one more if you're willing
Oh,
to
I'm
entertain
sorry.
it.
Yeah, go
No
ahead,
worries.
I'm sorry.
Are these are all ground-based towers? What about like, the little addendum extension towers?
So this
could
is
be
not
in a
small
building.
cell.
Right, yeah, so small cell has its own issues.
That'll be next.
No, we have some regulations for
Yeah,
that.
yeah, so small cells, really those have been pushed more towards structures in the right-of-way, already existing structures. You will have some applications for new standalone towers. Those have a maximum of, I believe, 50 feet or 10 feet above your tallest structure in the right-of-way. But really, we can't prohibit small cell structures altogether. There's not really any provision for an exemption for small cells, and I believe you do have already regulations on the books for those.
Yep.
Okay, fair enough, thanks.
Anything from you, Joanne?
Nope.
Yeah, I'll just get on my soapbox for a couple of seconds here. I mean, it's a classic example where we have two things that have been put into place that takes away local control. Act 67 and now this, which always frustrates me, because we should be able to determine what we feel is best for our own city, but, you know, the state and the special interests think differently. So that, I find that frustrating. In practicality, some of the requests that we've had recently have been in parks. We try to push them more toward industrial areas that might have space. One concern I would have is, you know, what if we put up a tower? Let's say back in the day they would have put up a tower down by the riverfront where we're redeveloping it. And so we take an industrial area or an area that we want to blight, and there's a tower there, and we decide we want to put in single-family homes, and the tower's already existing. What do we do? We really lose the ability to really follow our own ordinance in that case. I mean, I suppose they would be grandfathered in. Is that what would occur?
Right, it would be a non-conforming use where it just has to comply with whatever its
So-
original requirements were.
So that's where I struggle, where the state pretty much imposes their will on us because they have no idea what's going on in our community, and when we might run across a situation where it would not be appropriate because we know down the line, 5, 10, 20 years that area is going to be redeveloped as something different, and then we have a tower in the way, which really takes away from what we're trying to do. So I don't know. It's
Too bad they can't fit in like blighted lot or brown lot language within the state level of ordinance on that one, but
it
there's
doesn't
probably no appetite for it.
sound like that's anything we can do as a conditional use or anything else, is there?
No, because I think that would get close to crossing the line of like a prohibition in a zoning district. potentially, but it likely would run afoul of the state preemption.
So at this point, are you looking for direction, or do you want to, you recommend us to go down a certain path here, or what would you like from us?
So obviously, we've got a proposal right now. It's just a discussion topic tonight. If this is something the Plan Commission is interested in pursuing, we can, it's already drafted. We could put it on the agenda next time for actual consideration if the Plan Commission so chooses. Or if you want us to go in a different direction, we're more than happy to evaluate and come back with an opinion.
I'd certainly like to find a way so that we can retain as much local control as we possibly can.
I agree.
So I guess this isn't necessarily a zoning issue. You can have like a licensing ordinance, but the things that you can require are very basic, and it's sort of like just a checklist of items. So we can provide you more information on that if you would like. It wouldn't give you necessarily any like substantive control over tower locations or the ability to stop a tower once they submit their application. But you at least know when it's going in and what it's going to look like, essentially.
Is there, and I forget, it might be in here, you mentioned the height. Is there any diameter or colors or anything like that we can?
No, it would.
Paintings on it. I mean, if they want to put something on there that we might find offensive, but are they going to say there's freedom of speech? Or, I mean,
unfortunately, you can't deny a tower based on aesthetic concerns. So if you're looking at, what does it look like? What color is it? Things like that. You're prohibited from considering those types of things. The reason why we brought up the property values is that's one thing where the courts have said, yeah, that's fine. That's not a prohibition under state law. So you can maybe squeak something in the property value, but again, that does create complications for administration.
and it says we have to decide if we're going to do our own analysis. I assume we would hire their assessor to do it. And could we require the tower operator to at least pay for that service?
No.
Give me something to work with.
Yeah. So the state law also caps your fees. So you can charge up to.
Of course they do.
Yeah, you can charge up to $3,000, I believe, for a new tower. If it's a co-location, so they're trying to put equipment on an existing tower, it's a maximum of $500.
Nice. Which almost buys you nothing.
Almost pays for the attorney to draft the ordinance.
Nope, may not do that.
And I do understand the property impact.
Mm-hmm.
It's real, but I do understand the difficulty in, you making that a condition and having to fit it out, because we have that all the time in other issues that impact single families with things that are next door or down the street. And unfortunately, anything like towers, electric wires overhead, those are biggies with people now, so.
Yeah, and they don't always understand that we're pretty much at the mercy of the state law when it comes to these, as much as we try to communicate. But until it happens to you, you probably aren't really even paying attention. So what would you guys like to do?
Can we get it worded into ordinance to at least give us the semblance of as much control as possible
Well,
in conditional use, I guess?
the conditional use ordinance is going to create, you're going to have to really work through that process to figure out what that looks like. And then administering it is going to require oftentimes engaging an outside firm, potentially to hire somebody to dispute the valuation that they gave you, or the diminished values on properties. That'll probably exceed the application fee even if you charge that fee. So I don't know if we're going to if we ultimately have requests that would bump up against the conditional use. You know, if we have the regulatory framework really trying to protect the single-family homes, that seems to be the cleanest, easiest way for administration, and I'm not adverse to doing more, but I think we need to think about what we're going to gain if we try to take it just the next step. Are we going to gain enough to develop a conditional use process and make it substantive enough to really get what we're trying to protect? That's the reservation I have about going down that road.
And the single-family home, is that consistent with single-family duplexes, or is it?
Single-family homes. I think it was
Yeah,
just
and
single-family.
so it's unique about the language is it just says the zoning district allows single-family homes. So it doesn't mean that the property actually needs to be used for single-family. It could be a daycare center that it's zoned where single-family is an allowable use because the tower is next to that parcel. You still have that setback requirement. So
Okay.
it's just looking at what does the zoning district allow, not necessarily what is the use on the property.
And as Rick mentioned, our zoning code allows for single-family in more than just single-family
Right.
districts. So
Sure.
it gives us a little additional protection beyond just the SR, 4, 5, and 6 districts.
Okay, well, I guess then, I mean, just to run that simple route through would be good for now, and then hope we don't have to mount any challenge to it.
Yeah.
Just to be honest and open, just so you know, not to be honest, but just to let you know, there's cell tower people looking at Stoughton right now. We're doing our darndest to steer them to less visible locations, behind industrial properties, along the railroad tracks and things like this. So we're administratively, even though we might not have all the tools in place right now, the conversations we're having are trying to do that. Remote aspects of parkland potentially along the railroad tracks or things like that. Because even if you end up siting one on public lands, you then may actually end up with some income. Whether the city wants it or not, they could evaluate that request if it came that way.
Sure.
Yeah, it seems like long-term, which is easier said than done, we would like to, I think, get away from the conditional use permit process altogether. That is a long, hard, and expensive road to get to. So I don't think we really want to promote any more conditional uses than we already have.
Rodney, when you just talked about you didn't have all the tools, are you talking about setback restriction? What other tools
Yeah.
you're talking about?
Well, we recognize the local ordinances are not up to date.
Okay.
So we're cognizant of that. So our conversations with these companies are, they can dissect our ordinances without our help, but nonetheless, we're pointing them to areas, industrial in nature, not as visible locations if at all possible. They still have a goal of trying to make sure they fit their service need. They've got an area where they need to site one, and they've got a deficiency or whatever that has to be met. So given that, we're trying to push them into focusing on areas that are not as visible.
But you need some changes in order to be,
Yeah,
More
so the
intentional?
ordinance will help reinforce that to
Okay.
a certain degree. I think fortunately right now, they're looking at sites that probably wouldn't even bump up against what we're putting in now. That doesn't mean an application doesn't come in that would, but we think it's important to get something on our local books probably sooner than later.
We also appreciate the fact that the towers are servicing our community, so we don't want to totally discourage them from being here, but we try to work with them within reason on their placement. So, I mean, it's mutually beneficial, but, until it's, staring you in your backyard, then it becomes kind of the issue for us. But seems like what we have here seems pretty reasonable, I think.
But yeah, if we went with that direction, what we'd do is we'd set the public hearing for the upcoming Plan Commission meeting. We'd present the ordinance take testimony. Maybe something else somebody raises or thinks about in that time frame causes us to look differently at it.
That sounds like a
Okay.
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Anything from the Zoomers on this one?
I just want to say that I go along with what Mayor Swadley was speaking to earlier, that it sure would be nice if Act 67, which takes away local control from, a ruling from people that sort of it sounds like they want to give us local control, but by somehow taking away local control. Sure would be nice if Act 67 went away.
All right, so I think that's the end of that conversation. So it looks like we'll be seeing this one again.
Yep.
All right, and then the next item is future agenda items.
So at the start of the meeting, Alder Schumacher indicated an interest in 314 West Main. We know that that site plan still needs to come back through us. We were told by the developer that they're working out the easement language, so we hope to see that available for the next meeting. We're also expecting a general development plan process for lots 1, 3, and 4. And in 51 West, you'll recall we had an introduction about the concept, so we likely will have that at our next meeting as well. Following that, we're potentially going to have an urban service area amendment request for the Stonecrest area. That's the east side of city, other side of Racetrack Road, east side of the airport area, if you will. So that urban service area amendment request will be coming before us. In November, we'll have the preliminary plat for the Magnolia Springs area on the south side of town. So we're getting information and preliminary plat information on that. So that'll likely occur in November, not October for that item.
On 314, were we able to get at least access for those homeowners to the?
It's been functional. They've been able to use the gravel route behind the building since that happened. So, yep.
All right, anything the commissioners want to talk about at a future meeting?
I did like whoever put in, there's some drone pictures that were in our packet somewhere. I can't remember what those were, but of like at Rutland Dunn Line, that intersection, there was an aerial picture of it. And then at the Isham Street extension, I thought those were really helpful for visualizing.
We're also seeing them related to the 51 roundabout
Yep.
project, so,
Yep.
they're visible too.
Yeah, some of them were community members, some of them, the PD just purchased a new drone, and we
Okay.
have a couple that are licensed to fly it. They have a policy for it, so it can be used for certain things.
Sure.
Obviously, there's privacy issues, but if there's something that you think you want to have a look at, just let us know. We can get those aerials for you.
Certainly like to see it with development progress, that's for sure.
Okay. Yeah, they like to fly it.
Yeah.
Weather
Give
permitting.
them opportunities, so
I don't know how it goes in the rain.
not too well, I don't think.
All right. Anything else from commissioners? All right. Thanks, Attorney Matthew, for being here tonight. We'll probably be seeing you again. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Who had the
Take your pick.
second?
Bill, I think.
Take Bill.
Pick one.
Caravello had the second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Have a great night.
Night, everybody.
Good night.